65. Appreciate you streaming in. If you want, go ahead and hit that like button. Tell us we're doing an okay job, at least. Come on. You hit that button every once in a while. All right. Joining us for the next 15, 20 minutes to lend us some birds insight is from InsideTheBirds.com. Andrew DiCecco, who first things first, we have to question his attire. We made fun of Glenn McNabb because he had red on. What the hell are you doing wearing a dress, a jacket for? This is relaxed, Birds 365.
I have to look sharp. It's, we're covering the Super Bowl here, it's only right.
Andrew's got to upstage me. Well done. I also like, what do we got? Andrew writes about music as well. What is that, Def Leppard in the background?
Yeah, I got the Guitar World over there, the Def Leppard. I'm a big music guy, big concert guy, so I always have that represented at all times.
Nice. Would you wear that coat to a Def Leppard contest?
I don't think I could get away with that, Jody. I don't think that they like that.
That's why we're watching you here today. We'd rather see you in a Def Leppard t-shirt, but we'll talk to you just the same. All right, the big showdown. We still got 9 more days to wait before it comes down. Who's there more pressure on going into this game, Andrew?
I think there's more pressure on the Eagles, I would say, Jody, given everything that they've done this season, all the boxes that they checked off, all the accolades they collected throughout the season. The quarterback was MVP frontrunner for much of the season, and the Eagles just tore through the NFL. So I think to come up short in the big game, it's almost expected right now around the city of Philadelphia that they're going to win this game. And much of the season, we've all thought that they're going to win this game. So I think to come up short would be a disappointment. Knowing that you have a hobbled quarterback on the opposing sideline as well, and given the 70 sacks that the Eagles have been able to rack up throughout the season, I think everything's sort of setting up. John's been there every week, and he's there every day. So I think John can attest to this as well, that the matchup seems to favor the Eagles as we sit, 9 days out from the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and Andrew, if you think about Kansas City's loss to Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl, what was that about? It was about the pass rush, just getting Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable off his spots, speeding him up. And, as you mentioned, the Eagles with 70 sacks, Hassan Reddick, the year he's having. Kansas City's got a tremendous offensive line except for Andrew Wiley. And guess who gets the matchup with Andrew
Hassan
Wiley?
Reddick.
Yeah,
Hassan
exactly.
Reddick.
Yeah. So that does look like a good matchup on paper. It does seem to, and I want to bring this up because it just came across my timeline. Julian Love, the Giants safety, who's actually a very good young player, was on Good Morning Football, which is on when we're on. And evidently he's saying some things about Nick Sirianni. Here's what he said. He's in for a free ride. You and I could coach that team. More disrespect for the Eagles. But they do have this. They're the better team. 53 through 1 through 53. They're better than Kansas City. Everybody seems to be realizing it. And, Julian Love wants to take shots at the coach. Some people take shots at the quarterback. But people are starting to realize how stinking talented this Eagles team is.
Yeah, it only took, 17, 18, 19 weeks for them to figure it out. All season, John, we've heard, but they haven't played anybody. You play who's in front of you, you dominate your opponent, and that's all they can control. But it's interesting now. You heard Micah Parsons, go out on a limb on Twitter yesterday or the other day and, vouch for the Eagles and hope that, talk to Lane Johnson, hope he gets a ring. And now you're seeing Julian Love, also from an NFC East rival, say that. So I think the Eagles are starting to collect some praise throughout the NFL. But I'm pretty sure if you were to poll anybody in that locker room, John, they don't want that. They want to have their backs against the wall mentality.
Oh yeah, they want to be the underdog
and not get too comfortable or complacent.
Yeah.
And by the way, I give Micah Parsons this much credit. He said it before they faced Eagles. He made his comments about Hurts before he had actually then go play him. Julian Love running his mouth now after the Giants have gotten there. What's kicked by the Eagles 3 times in 1 year. Yeah, funny you didn't mention that before any of those games, Julian, that the Eagles were so good that a monkey could have coached them. Yeah, I'm giving no credence whatsoever to that comment. And I will give, again, Parsons credit. Because he did. He reached out and said, hey, what Lane Johnson is doing right now is like off the charts. It's historic, untouched on his side of the football.
And he got a lot of crap from Cowboys fans for it.
That's what I'm saying. He got a lot of crap from Eagle fans for saying what he did about Hurts. You got to acknowledge that he's giving props to the potential Hall of Famer on the Eagles' right side. Lane Johnson has gotten shot up, whatever necessary, to play the 2 games since coming back from the injury. Does the extra week this week, how do you ask Lane Johnson to be better than what he is the point, I guess, I'm trying to get at. How do you get better than the quarterback never gets touched? Is it a complete non-factor? We not even consider the fact that he's playing with a torn adductor in the Super Bowl, Andrew?
Yeah, what Lane Johnson been able to do, Jody, has been one of the more remarkable things that I've seen probably since in my entire time covering the NFL. I mean, that is a significant injury. Knowing what what that requires, that abductor injury, what that requires from an offensive lineman to stave off some of the elite pass rushers in the NFL as he's doing it is just it's heroic. It's nothing short of heroic what he's doing. He's laying it on the line for his teammates. Everybody's playing a little bit harder. You know what's at stake here. And it's not going to get any better. That extra week isn't going to necessarily alleviate any of the pain. I mean, I think the Eagles are doing well by him to rest him when necessary, when they can, and things like that. But it's not going to improve. It's just I think the pain has probably amplified significantly since he took the field against the Giants in the divisional round.
Yeah, and he's going to have surgery after the season. So it's one of those things where you're right, Andrew. He's just pushing through. Now, last week was the big test with Nick Bosa. This week, Chris Jones, but, that front, Frank Clark's a good pass rusher at times. I think Steve Spagnuolo generates a lot of pressure with blitzes. I went through it with Jeffrey Simmons earlier in the year with Dexter Lawrence after he lit up Minnesota and Nick Bosa last week. Eagles shut all these people down. They shut all these people down. Not only Lane, this offensive line is the best in football. Is that the biggest advantage the Eagles have? Always the offensive line.
Yeah, I think so, John. I'm like a trench junkie. Like I'm fascinated by the matchups on the inside there. And I guess the big question to me becomes Landon Dickerson's viability, or I guess his effectiveness with that hyperextended elbow. He's been playing at a high level. People forget he's a Pro Bowl player this year.
Yeah.
And playing alongside Kelsey, there's that cohesiveness there. You want to see if he's going to be able to play at that same level. He's going to play in the Super Bowl, but you want to see how he's going to be able to do that because Chris Jones, it's going to require Kelsey and some help. I mean, 15 and a half sacks, 29 quarterback hits this year. So, but yeah, the Eagles have the advantage on the offensive line in every matchup this season. But this is going to be, everything's going to be magnified in this game. The margin for error is so small in a game of this magnitude.
And the Eagles will have the advantage on the offensive line again this week, which means they should, in theory, be able to run the football when they want, when they need. The last couple of games, they've used all 3 of their backs, whether it's Gainwell, whether it's Boston Scott, whether the guy who's been the numero uno for most of the games this year, Miles Sanders. Are we going to see the combo effort again here? It's worked 2 weeks running, but last week was more kind of just running out the clock than it was pouring it on. How do you think the Eagles deploy their running backs coming into this game, carry-wise?
Jody, I think you're going to see more of the 3-headed rushing attack, kind of circa 2003 when the Eagles had Deuce Staley, Brian Westbrook, Carell Buckhalter. Each running back has such a diverse skill set, and I think they're going to deploy them as they see fit. I think if you look at the snap share throughout the latter part of the season, John, Kenny Gainwell saw he was taking on more of a workload, whether that had to do with Miles Sanders' knee or just simply preserving him for the playoffs. I think that they've seen him sort of come into his own late, sort of like that 2017 Corey Clement resurgence. And you're starting to see, obviously, Boston Scott's effective in the red zone. And I think that Kenny Gainwell is showing that he can be a little bit more of an explosive option, used sporadically. So they have the best of all the different skill sets with all those 3 runners. So I think you're going to see him deploy them like that.
Yeah, Kenny is an interesting player because I think he had a disappointing regular season, but all of a sudden the postseason comes and he looks like, he's got some juice because he hasn't touched it a ton. He's not worn down, and he's really effective. But I wanted to ask you, Andrew, from a larger perspective, not just Kenny, did you learn anything in these 2 games? Because the Eagles just waxed these teams. I mean, we knew they were a good team. But other than that, I kind of say, all right, I put them aside. I didn't really learn anything against San Francisco with Josh Johnson out there and all the struggles they had, the frustration. I didn't really learn anything by beating up on the Giants again.
No, that
Did you learn anything?
That was a really strange game too, by the way. 54. Jalen Hurts goes 5 of 7 for 54 yards. They punch it in, and then they only generate 13 yards combined on the next 3 drives.
Yeah.
It was weird. But no, John, I haven't really learned anything. But the one takeaway that I have is that the team was poised and ready for the moment. And a lot of times you'll see some of these teams, especially when you have a lot of young players at key spots, the lights sometimes are too bright for them. And that wasn't the case for this Eagles team. They rose to the occasion. They followed Nick Sirianni and his messaging, and Jalen Hurts and his confidence and collectiveness at all times. And I thought that they really took it to those two teams, and they never wavered once. And certainly, obviously, as you pull away, that makes it a little bit easier. But I think that experience and that, sort of connectivity, which is one of his core values, Nick Sirianni, I think that's going to help them moving forward in the big game.
Andrew, everybody gets a chance to weigh in on the Eagles assistant coaches, most prominently the two coordinators. A month ago or so, we might have said, hey, one of these two coordinators got to get a head coaching job. The Eagles have just been too good. They're going to be too good to pass up on. Now it looks like neither one of them will be getting their first chance to be a head coach before next year. Yes, Steichen is still in the running for the Colts job. It hasn't been filled yet, but not sure that's the direction they're going. How advantageous is that for there's a portion of the fans here in town that were hoping that Jonathan Gannon got the gig somewhere else. But in your opinion, how important is this Eagles staff staying together to be able to be right back where they are again next year in 2023?
Well, it's going to be hard for them to get right back to where they are, given all the free agency and all the uncertainty surrounding that, Jody. But I think that having those two coordinators in place from a continuity standpoint helps them tremendously, especially someone like Jalen Hurts, who's never really had stability from his offensive coaches throughout his career. And Jonathan Gannon, for as much flack as he gets around this city, I really thought that he's really stood tall and called some really good games early in the postseason when it's really mattered. And I mean, they really they're building something special there. He's getting the personnel that he needs to execute his system. Shane Steichen's pushing all the right buttons. So to have that moving forward, which it looks like in all likelihood next season, it's going to benefit the Eagles tremendously.
By the way, I wish Brock Purdy would have stayed healthy in that game because it was a very small sample size, Andrew, but it was 6 plays. But the Eagles they looked like they were jumping every in-breaking route really quickly. And I thought, if that game played out the way I thought it would play out, I thought Brock Purdy would have been kind of exposed, at least if the Eagles continued to go down that route. They were making it really difficult for him. And I think JG would have looked a lot better if he finished that game and the Eagles kind of dominated and won the NFC Championship game that way. But did you see that early on? Again, very small sample size. But to me, the secondary looked really, really aggressive. And they were going to jump the in-breaking stuff.
Yeah, you make a really good point there, John. And when I went back and watched that game again, they were aggressive to the ball. They were more aggressive than the Niners were. They were very anticipatory in the way that they were reading Brock Purdy. Again, it was small sample size, but I think if he was able to play the entirety of the game, you would see probably another Bradbury interception. CJ Gardner-Johnson probably would have came away with one. I thought that his game plan, at least in essence, looked like it was going to be a masterful.
It looked like
one.
It was going to be very 49er centric. It really did to me. But it's so small a sample size.
So he's going to continue to get slighted and questions and be skepticism throughout the next 9 days.
Right. So do you guys agree with me? It'll be more of like what we saw from Jonathan Gannon all year in this matchup against the Chiefs than against the 49ers because it's Patrick Mahomes, not
I think we're going to see
Brock Purdy.
I think we're going to see a lot of quarters this week, Andrew.
Absolutely. I think they're going to play them straight up, try to keep everything in front of them, limit the explosives. It's sort of been the MO all season. And again, you're playing against Patrick Mahomes, so you have to prepare for everything. I do think that they're not traditionally a shot play team. I think Marquez Valdez-Scantling is their shot play guy. There are going to be a lot of dink and dunks. They use Jerick McKinnon a lot. Their running back. He's third on the team in receptions. So I think you're going to see a lot of that, trying to pick up yards, incrementally throughout the longer drives.
Yeah. That Kansas City team, obviously, it starts with Andy Reid, and that's the most obvious storyline of this game and Andy's history here. Somehow he's become a better coach in Kansas City. Maybe that just has to do with Patrick Mahomes, but nonetheless, he's been there 10 years, 9 playoff appearances, all the championship games. But Nick Sirianni started his pro career in Kansas City, and ironically, it was Andy coming in, and he said, "Look, Nick, I have David Culley. You're a great young head coach, but you got to go elsewhere." The coaching matchup, experience versus youth, innovation, energy. You think you're always going to lean towards Andy Reid. It's one of the best coaches of all time. But do you think it's a blowout from a coaching perspective?
After these last 2 games we've seen, John, it's kind of hard to count the Eagles out and eliminate that possibility. But I think it's going to be a little bit more closely contested, obviously. But I do think that the Eagles are going to have more energy out there. I think that all stems from Nick Sirianni. He wears his emotions on his sleeve and everything like that. I also think one thing that we need to take into account, we talk about coaching, is David Taub, their special teams coach. He's one of the best in the business. They have a good returner. They have a good punter in Tommy Townsend, who was an all-pro this year. And when you look at those minor details, it could come down to those minor details when you're talking about those 2 teams. And sometimes experience can trump that youthful exuberance and enthusiasm. So I think the Eagles will be ready to go, but it could come down to those minor details, as I said.
2 quarterback questions, comping one team to the other. I have noted since the matchup was known that something Eagle fans have to at least realize, if not admit to, this is the best quarterback they played all year. The whole Eagles haven't played anybody. John's line about they've made somebody's into nobodies is tremendous.
That's
in describing
line,
the Eagles season. But the truth is, they haven't played a quarterback like Mahomes. They Rodgers, the only one that was even close, and his team at the time, the season just wasn't going the way that it was supposed to. He's got a lot of young guys. Mahomes is the best quarterback they played. But flip side it, the Chiefs haven't played a running quarterback all year. They played good quarterbacks, Herbert and Kelly and Burrow, but they haven't played a running quarterback all year. How much is Jalen keeping the ball, taking off, making plays with his legs going to be a factor in this Super Bowl?
Very much so, Jody. He's their +1 and somebody that you have to account for at all times. They do have a pretty good second level in Nick Bolton and Willie Gay. I think if I had to guess, I would think that Willie Gay would probably spy him. He's pretty athletic and closes quickly. But to have to account for the quarterback in that regard, and Jalen Hurts has a way to alter the dynamic of a game. Even not, shoulder injury notwithstanding, he's going to lay it all on the line and do whatever he has to do to win this game. And I think you're going to see that should sort of take shape, whether it be 10, 12 carries, he's going to do whatever's needed. And I think that puts unique stress on any defense.
By the way, Willie Gay, another storyline. A.J. Brown played high school football together. So that in a Super Bowl full of storylines, that's another one. I want to circle back to Julian Love because I've been asking a lot of people this. Who's most responsible for this run, Andrew? Howie Roseman or this coaching staff? If you had to divvy out, and obviously it's a combination of both, but if you had to divvy out 60-40, 70-30, who gets a bigger part of that pie?
Howie Roseman, for bringing in the players he brought in the ingredients for the coaching staff to cook with, right? And it's up to the coaching staff to maximize those ingredients and put out, a dish, if you're equating it to something like that. And it's if they were to fall short, I mean, they've given them all the resources. Howie's given the coaching staff all the resources that they need to be successful. And I think you got to give credit to Nick Sirianni and his coaching staff in maximizing that. And so I think, that none of that happens without Howie and utilizing his resources.
Andrew, how big a factor do the handful of Eagle players who were here in 2017, part of that Super Bowl championship winning team, veteran guys who've already got the respect of the locker room, they have it on a week in, week out basis. How much more this week because they've been there and done that?
I think it helps exponentially, Jody. The fact that not only that, but a couple of those guys, knowing that could be their last game in the National Football League before they hang it up. I think it's just that whole connectivity that I mentioned earlier, knowing that you're going to see guys rally around that and really not take that lightly. Guys like Jason Kelsey, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson. People forget that Greg Ward won a ring. He was on that team on the practice squad. He's still around.
Jody's guy.
How about Greg Ward?
I talked to him after the game the other day, just because obviously he was Edelman and Amendola that whole practice week. So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, I think that leadership is really going to play a big role in helping the Eagles get prepared for this game and eliminate any potential distractions.
Yeah, speaking of that team, that 2017-2018 team, Andrew, I think this team is better. What say you? I think, if they won't be regarded as better if they don't finish it. Mm-hmm. But honestly, they're a better team. They're a better team than that 2017 group.
Well, I would have to agree with you. Obviously, on paper, it's not going to look that way if they're not able to finish the deal in Glendale. But you go position by position, John. It's night and day. I mean, A.J. Brown versus Alshon Jeffrey, and you just go on and on down the list. And the Eagles, this team is probably the best Eagles team ever assembled.
Now, the one thing I will say, though, is, Andrew, the spot. I mean, think about the way Nick Foles played in that Super Bowl, most obviously. Corey Clement, Zach Ertz on 4th and 1, Alshon Jeffrey early in the game. Those guys had something special going on that season.
Absolutely. I mean, Alshon doing that with would he have a rotator cuff injury?
Torn labrum, whatever it was. Yeah, he was playing hurt throughout the whole season. It seems like everybody. Nelson Aguilar had his best game as a professional on the biggest stage.
84 yards. Yeah. I mean, everybody who stepped up at the right time, and you got unlikely heroes. You just mentioned Nick Foles. You mentioned Nelson Aguilar. You mentioned Corey Clement.
Wasn't a catch, by the way. Sorry, Eagles.
So you're right. I don't know. I mean, you could say you might get that kind of performance out of a Kenny Gainwell, or I don't want to. Who knows? Maybe a Quez Watkins. Maybe he catches a deep ball on the secondary. But I think if the Eagles have shown anything, this version of the Eagles, John, it's that they can win in a multitude of ways, whether it's running the ball down your throat like they did against the Green Bay Packers, winning a closely contested game against the Colts where they had to come from behind, winning in favorable conditions in the frozen tundra at Soldier Field, or step up in the postseason when the lights are brightest and deliver on the big stage. So this team has proven that they can do whatever way they need to.
All right, Andrew, since you went there, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire a little bit here. I'm going to give you 3 guys, and it's a multiple choice question, and you can choose either of the 3 answers. Last game ever, last game in an Eagle uniform, or see you at OTAs come the off season. Brandon Graham.
I think Brandon comes back. I think he comes back for another season in Philly.
So see you at OTAs. How about Jason Kelsey?
I think Jason Kelsey retires.
Okay.
Now, do you think the game has something to do with his retirement? If he wins, does he go out on top? If he loses, does he come back?
I think the game has something to do with it, John. But even last season, those close to him, and you were there. I mean, he had one foot out the door essentially. Yeah. So I have to think that this year would even push the needle even further in that direction.
Yeah. All right, and last one is Fletcher Cox.
I think Fletcher plays another season, but not in Philadelphia.
No, so you got one of each. One coming back, one going elsewhere, and one saying goodbye of the 3 veteran guys who, if the Eagles win, will be getting Super Bowl ring number 2.
Yeah, and actually, there's a potential that Fletcher does come back. Hargrave, I think, is going to command top dollar at the position.
Yeah.
So I think you would have to retain one of them. You have Jordan Davis, you have Milton Williams, but you'd really be light in that position. So it's something to mull over for sure.
At DiCecco NFL, you see it there. Follow Andrew on Twitter. Read him InsideTheBirds.com. Does a great job. Jeff Mosher, our buddy over there. Adam Kaplan. Andrew, I'll go, since Jody went down that route, I'll go a similar route, but different. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Javon Hargrave, James Bradbury, CJ Gardner-Johnson. These are guys coming off career years. Maybe not Javon, but Javon, you could argue he's had a career year.
Oh, yeah.
He had a very good year last year. More consistency, though. The other two, smack dab, phenomenal years. Best time to hit the market. They're all going to be expensive. Can't keep them all, or can you? Who do you keep? Who goes?
I love this question, and this is something that I've been asked a little bit, quite a few times this week. I think if you're the Eagles, you have to find a way to retain CJ Gardner-Johnson, just given his versatility and ability to play nickel, play safety. Young, youth, at least 25 years old, 6 interceptions this year, NFL co-leader in interceptions. James Bradbury, his cohesiveness with Darius Slay has been really fun to watch all season. He's probably one of the smartest corners I've ever had the pleasure of watching. Really smart player.
Such a smart player. It's unbelievable.
And at only 29 years old, I have to think he's going to command maybe not the elite corner pay, but top dollar. I think he sort of priced himself out of the Eagles' budget this year, given the season that he's had. So I don't think that they'll be able to get him. Who else did we mention?
Javon. Yeah, because you have Jordan Davis, you have
Milton Williams,
you have young players who seemingly are ready to step up, and Javon's teetering on 30. Do you want to give the big deal again to Javon?
To have a veteran in the room, I think maybe it would be effective to do so. I don't know if the Eagles view him as an every down starter moving forward because he's getting a little bit older. He's taken on a lot of snaps in the last couple of seasons. I still think that he is going to. So there's going to be some team that brings him in and views him as sort of a final piece, being that pass rushing defensive tackle that can collapse the pocket. And I think that he'll probably go elsewhere next season.
All right, last one for me.
Those are two big losses, by the way.
Yeah,
those are two big losses.
Howie's going to have to do a little magic this offseason. All right, last one for me. Also, Eagles' future past the Super Bowl. Know that you're a draft guy. And the Senior Bowl is taking place down in Mobile this week. I didn't get a chance to watch the practice yesterday. I watched some highlights afterwards. Eagles have 2 first-round draft picks. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say they're not going to use one on a quarterback because that Hurts guy is okay.
That's a good one.
Yeah. But is there a quarterback in the offing later in the draft for the Eagles? Is there any of the guys who are in Mobile this week who you say, all right, this is the future backup. This is the inexpensive. We're revisiting Jalen Hurts again in philosophy, maybe not on talent level, but in philosophy. Anybody you like in Mobile this week throwing the ball?
Not overly. I'm going to have to dive into it a little bit more, Jody, after the season. The season's taken on a little bit more, sort of eating into my draft coverage. But another player that we haven't mentioned yet that is a free agent on the Eagles, that knowing how important the backup quarterback is to the Eagles, Gardner Minshew. I don't know if teams view him as a viable starter. I would have to think not, given his lackluster performance. But I don't know how they feel about him from a preparational standpoint and some of the things he's done behind the scenes to help Jalen. I don't know if you can get him on the cheap if that would make sense.
Yeah. It's interesting, by the way. Great that we don't have to pay attention to the Senior Bowl because
normally I'm there.
Yeah, we'd be knee deep in Senior Bowl talk typically, but when you're in the Super Bowl, Senior Bowl's going on. Who cares?
Yeah. That's why I didn't watch it yesterday. But remember, you heard it here first. Jake Haener, Fresno State. I've been talking him up for 2 years.
Yeah,
gutsy.
Talk him up.
Throws the ball into tight windows. He's not a big guy, but then again, not all the quarterbacks are.
A high upside backup.
Put him on the side as a guy the Eagles should have interest in as a potential backup.
And by the way, Jalen Hurts is not going to be afraid of Haener coming in. like a
Yeah,
certain
unlike
someone.
Carson
Yeah,
Wentz.
he's not going to tap out.
Looking over
No.
his shoulder like poor
Yeah.
Carson did. Exactly
Yeah.
right. Andrew, great stuff. Appreciate you jumping in with us today. We will certainly have you back on again. Enjoyed the week leading up to the big game.
Pleasure, guys. Talk soon.
Thanks, Andrew.
Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com here with us on Birds 365. All right. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. That makes us Mac and Mac.